quick demo of this video tutorial. In this tutorial, we will implement Angular 5 login and logout with Web API using token based authentication. So here we have the final output from this tutorial. First of all, I am going to register an user. Username will be Ethan. Then we have password as 123. Then we have email ethan@gmail.com. Then we have first name, it will be Ethan itself, Ethan Robert. Now click on submit here. So here we successfully created a user Ethan. Now I'm going to log in inside this application using this Ethan record. Username will be Ethan, then password will be 123. Click on login. So here we successfully authenticated the user using token based authentication. Inside this div, we have shown details of user like username, email, full name, then time of login. In order to log out from this application, you can click on this logout button here. So in this tutorial, we will discuss points like how to create login form in Angular 5 application, how to implement OWIN token based authentication in Web API, Angular 5 routing guards, then HTTP interceptors, and much more. So I hope you will find this tutorial helpful for your upcoming Angular 5 and Web API projects. So please watch till the end of this video tutorial. What's up YouTube? Welcome to .NET Mob. In this tutorial, we will discuss how to implement user authentication or login and logout in Angular 5 with Web API project. This is a continuation to the previous tutorial in which we have discussed how to implement user registration or user sign up in Angular 5 with Web API and ASP.NET Identity Membership System. If you have not watched that user registration tutorial, please watch that first and then continue with this tutorial, because in this tutorial we are going to authenticate user with username and password which we have given during user registration. Before continuing with this tutorial, I would like to ask you a favor. If you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video. If you are new here, please be subscribed to this channel .NET Mob. Without further ado, let's get started with previous tutorial Angular 5 project in which we have created a user registration form like this. So first of all, inside this Angular application, I will design a login form for user authentication. And we will move to the Web API project from previous tutorial. In that, we will implement OWIN token based authentication. Inside this Angular 5 application, we need to add few more components. So here is the final structure of Angular application which we are going to create inside this tutorial. So here we have the sign up component. This is already there inside this application. Now we need to add three more components: user component, sign in component, and home component. Okay, user component will be the parent component to these child components sign in and sign up. Inside this sign in component, we will deal with user authentication and login form design. After a successful user authentication, we will open home component for that particular user. And here we have the routes.ts file. Inside that, we will configure application routing. And finally, we have auth folder. Inside that, we have auth guard and auth interceptor. Now back to the Angular application. Here we need to create three more components. So let me open one more terminal here. As you can see, my folder path is too long. In order to hide this path, you can do this prompt, then $, hit enter. In order to create an Angular component, you can use this command ng g for generate c4 component. I will name this component as user. Hit enter. So here we have the newly created component user. As we have discussed, user component will be the parent component for sign in and sign up component. So now we need to move this sign up component inside this user folder. So let me drag this inside this user component folder. Click on move. Now we need to create one more sign in component inside this user folder. So right click on it, then open in terminal. Now let's create sign in component ng g for generate c4 component. Component name will be sign in. Hit enter. So here we have created the new folder for sign in component. Now we have to create one more component, home. So let me open one more terminal here. ng g for generate, c for component name will be home, hit enter. So here we have created all required components inside this application. Now inside this signup component, there might have some broken import statement due to its location change. So first of all, let's fix that. So here we have some errors with this user and user service import statement. So let me remove this statement from here. Now let's add import statement for these classes again. So you can use the shortcut control then hold period, then click on this import statement here. Same for user service class also. That's it. Now back to app.module.ts file. Here we have the broken import statement. Let me remove this, then click on this sign up component, then use the shortcut control period. Click on this import statement here. Now everything is fine. Now let me open the style sheet file, styles.css. Here we have the styles from previous tutorial. I want to update these styles here. So let me update these CSS rules here. Then back to index.html. Inside this index.html, we need to add a style sheet reference for material icons. In previous Angular application, we have used font over some icons. Inside this application, we are going to use material icons like this. Okay, so let me add the style sheet reference for material icons here. Now back to the default app component HTML here. Now I'm going to replace this div with router outlet. Basically, router outlet will be replaced with the component HTML based on application routing. Don't worry if you are not aware of routing in Angular applications. We will discuss them in this tutorial itself. So let me replace this with router outlet. In order to work this router outlet, we have to configure routing inside this application. We will do that later. Now back to index.html file. Here we have added style attribute for background color with hexadecimal color code in previous tutorial. Now I am going to replace this style with some classes from Materialize CSS framework. So let me add the class here. Class is equal to deep-purple. Then we need one more class, lighten-5. As we have discussed in previous tutorial, we have been using Materialize CSS instead of Bootstrap. So these two classes are from Materialize CSS in order to apply background color inside this application. You can see them inside the framework documentation. Just search for color here. By using combination of meaningful and readable class names, we can apply background color to HTML components like this. Okay, that is what we have done inside this index.html. Now let me open signup component HTML. Inside that, we have created user registration or user signup form in previous tutorial. We have shown this form component inside a container card component from Materialize CSS. It almost look like this. Okay, we have shown this form inside card component with a title user registration here. Inside this application, we have user component as a parent component for these two child component, sign in component and sign up component. Inside this child component, sign in component, we will show the login form. Inside the signup component, we will show the user registration form only. For these two child component, we can add a container or outer part inside this parent component user component.html file. So let's look how we can do that. So first of all, from this signup component HTML, I'm going to remove the container or card component from this file. So let me remove this card div from here and we will just keep the user registration form here. Okay, That's it. So here we have user registration form inside the sign up component. Inside this parent component HTML, user component HTML, we are going to add a container for login form or user registration form. It will be the card component from Materialize CSS. In previous tutorial, we have used card component with content and title. In this project, we need a card component with tab controls. Okay, so it will look like this. We need two tabs, one for sign-in form and one for user registration. I have prepared HTML for cards with tab control. So let me copy paste the code here. So here we have the div with class container. Then we have used grid system from the framework, and we have used card component here. Okay. Inside that card, we have two tabs, one for sign in and one for sign up. Based on current URL or route, we will show the form user registration or login form inside this div here. Okay, now we need to configure routing inside this application. For that, I'm going to add a new file inside this app folder here. Create new file. I will name this file as routes.ts file, which we have given inside this structure here, routes.ts. Inside that, we have to configure routing for this Angular application. First of all, I will add a constant here, export constant. I will name this constant as app routes, and it's of the type routes from Angular library routes, and basically it is an array. For each route, we will add one route object inside this array here. Okay, now let's add import statement for this routes class here. Import routes from Angular router. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to add a route for home component or dashboard. So path will be equal to home. Then we need to provide the component. Component is equal to home component, which will be this one. Okay, now let me copy this home component from here and pasting here. Now we need to add an import statement for this home component. For that, you can use the shortcut hold control then press pd, then click on this import statement. Now let's add a route for user registration. Path is equal to sign up, then component. First of all, I will type the route here, and after that we will discuss them. Is equal to user component. For that, we have to add an import statement. So here it is. Now we need to add a children array here. Children is equal to a new array. Inside that, we will give the path. Path is equal to empty string. Then we have component. Component is equal to sign up component. Now let's add the import statement here. So here we have added a route for sign up component. Path will be sign up. Then we have component as user component. Then we have children array with component sign up. Okay, that means when we use this URL path sign up, it will load two components, user component and sign up component. User component will be the parent component and child component will be the sign up component. Using this parent component, we will load the container, which is this card component from Materialize CSS. Inside this div, content div, we will load the children component, sign up component. Okay, like this, we have to add one more route for login. So let me copy this and pasting below that. Then path will be login. Then parent component will be user component itself. Then children component will be sign in component. So let me add the class and import statement here. Finally, we have to add one route for default URL. So it will be something like this. Path is equal to empty string. Then we will redirect to /login. Then path match is equal to full. So this route will redirect to this sign-in component. That means by default inside this application, we will show login form. Here we have the default route inside this application. With these two routes, we have added routes for sign-in and sign-up component. Both of these components does not require user authentication, but other components like home component, we need to authenticate the user. That we can do after implementing token-based authentication in Web API project. For now, here we have just created a constant for route purpose. Now we need to tell this application to follow these routes. For that, open app-module.ts file. First of all, we have to add an import statement for router module. So here it is, import router module from Angular router. Now inside this imports array here, we need to do this router module dot for root. Inside this function we have to pass the route constant which we have added here, app route. Let me copy this and pasting inside this function here. Now we have to add an import statement. For that you can use this shortcut, hold Control then press period, then use this import statement. Okay, now let me save all of these modifications here and back to the application here, and here we have the tab control with sign in and sign up tab. So when we click on this sign in component, we have to show login form here which we have not designed yet. When we click on this sign up component, we need to show user registration form here. In order to work this tab, first of all we need to do this, go to user component HTML here. We need to add router link attribute here. Router link is equal to /login, and for sign up tab we need to do this, router link is equal to sign up. Okay, now let me save this and back to the application here. If I click on this sign up here, you can see that we are showing user registration. Now back to sign in tab, we have the HTML from sign in component. Inside the framework documentation, you can see some styles for active tabs here which we have not applied here. Okay, here inside this documentation, active tab got a CSS class active. Okay, now we need to apply the same class inside these tabs here. For that we can do this, router link active is equal to active class. So when our login is the current active route, we will apply this CSS class active. We need to do the same for sign up tab. So let me copy this and pasting here. Let me save this and back to the application here. So here we have applied active class to the current tab. Now we have to design login form inside sign in component HTML. So back to Visual Studio Code editor, then open sign in component HTML here. First of all, we need a form with classes called, then S12, then white background, then hit tab. So here we have the form component with given classes. We don't need this action attribute here. Let me remove that. First of all, I'm going to set a local reference, login form is equal to ng form. Inside this form, first of all, we need a div with class row, Inside that we need another div with class input field, then call s12. Inside that we will show a input text box for username. So input, then type will be text, then we need to set local reference as username, then ng model, then we need to set the name attribute as username. After that we need placeholder is equal to username. Okay, before this username text box we need to add a material icon. Okay, we have already added style sheet reference for this material icon in index.html. Now we need to add an icon, which is this one, account circle, before this text box. For that we can add an I tag here with classes material hyphen icons. Then we need the class prefix. Inside that we will give the name account. Instead of space we need to give underscore here, account underscore circle. Let me save this and back to the application here. So here we have a text box for username with material icon. Like this we need to add one more text box for password. So let me copy this div and pasting below that, and then we need to change accordingly. Instead of this account circle icon we need an icon with key. So we will use this one, vpn underscore key, and here I will set this text box type as password. Then we will change the local reference password. Usually I use camel case for this local reference, so let me edit here, username, then password name will be password. Okay, then placeholder will be password. Now finally we need to add one more div for submit button. So here it is. Here we have added a button of the type submit with text login. Okay, now let me save this and back to the application here. Now we need to add validation inside this form. For that I will add required attribute to these two text boxes, required and required here. Okay, as we have discussed in previous tutorial, we are going to validate these two text boxes based on Angular classes ng-invalid and ng-dirty, which we have given here inside this styles.css here. When a text box has ng-invalid and ng-dirty at a time, we will apply this validation indication with red border. Okay, now back to the form here. Finally, I want to disable the submit button login when this form as a whole is not valid. For that we can add this attribute here, disabled attribute, when this form is not valid. Let me save all of these modifications here, then back to the application. If I enter something inside this text box and then clear, we can see this validation error indication with red border. Okay, same for password also. So when this form is valid, then only we will enable this login button here. So here we have completed with Angular 5 login form. Now back to the Web API project from previous tutorial, there we have implemented user registration using ASP.NET Identity. Now inside this application we are going to implement user authentication using OWIN. OWIN stands for Open Web Interface for .NET applications. Basically it acts as a middleware between application and web server. That means middleware between ASP.NET application and IIS server. Nowadays, new features are added to Ovin day by day. In this project, we will implement token-based authentication from scratch using Ovin. Okay. First of all, we have to install some NuGet packages. For that, you can right click on these references here, then click on manage NuGet packages, then search for identity.ovin, then install this package Microsoft ASP.NET Identity Ovin. Click on install here, click on accept. Now we need to add two more packages. For that, you can search for ovin.host. So you can install this package microsoft.ovin.host.systemweb. Click on accept. And here comes the final package ovin.cos. Install this package microsoft.ovin.cos. So here we have installed three packages related to Ovin. In order to use Ovin inside this web API project, first of all we have to add Ovin startup class. For that, you can right click on this project, then add new item, then search for Ovin startup class. I will name this class as startup. Click on add. By default, inside this startup class we have a function configuration with this parameter iAppBuilder. Inside this function we will configure token based authentication that we can do in a bit. Before that, we have to add one more auth provider class. Inside that, we will validate a user with given username and password. For that, you can right click on this project, then add class. I will name this class as application auth provider. Click on add. So here we have the class. Now we need to inherit the parent class here, OAuth authorization server provider. For that, we have to use this namespace Microsoft Ovin Security OAuth. Generally, inside this class, we will override two functions. First one is this one, validate client authentication. With this function, we will authenticate the client device based on the given client ID and secret code. Inside this application, we don't want to authenticate the client device. Instead, we want to authenticate the user based on his username and password. For that, we can override this function, grant resource owner credentials. Inside the function, we will authenticate the user based on his username and password. Now let me add required namespace for task here, system.threading.task. Inside this application, we don't want to authenticate client device. So I will directly validate this client authentication context here, context.validated. Inside this grant resource owner credential function, we have to check given password and username inside our database. For that, I will add two objects of user store and user manager. Okay. Let me add the namespace here. Now we have to find the user with given username and password. For that, we can do this. User is equal to await manager dot find async. Inside the function, we have to provide the username and password that we can get from this context parameter. So we can do this context dot username, then context dot password. If there is a user with given username and password, we can say that user authentication is successful. Okay. Otherwise, we will just return from here as return. Now we are going to add claims related to the logged in user. Basically, claim means a statement about the logged in user. Here we are going to store details like first name, last name, then time of login. For that, first of all, we need to create an object of claims identity like this. So let me add the namespace here. Now using this object, we can add claims related to the login user. Like this, we have username, email, first name, last name, and then login time. So these claims will be stored as a key value dictionary inside the application. Finally, we have to validate the user. For that, we can do this context.validated function can be called. Inside that, we can pass this object identity. So here we have completed with auth provider. Here we have specified how do we want to authenticate a user. In previous tutorial, in order to enable codes inside this application, we have added this line inside web API config file. Here we have allow request from port number 4200 using an NuGet package web API codes. Now let me try to enable codes using Ovin. So let me comment this line here. Now back to startup class here. We can do this app dot, that means I app builder object use course function can be called, then pass this parameter here. For that we have to use this namespace Microsoft Ovin course. Now let's look how we can add token based authentication using Ovin inside this application. For that, first of all, we have to create auth options like this. So here it is. Let me add required namespace here. Now we can discuss these options one by one. Before that, let me run this application without debug mode. For that, you can use the shortcut hold Ctrl then press F5. So here is the first option, token endpoint path. Here we have given the path as token/token. Here you can see the base address of this web API project. First of all, we have to make an HTTP post request with this token URL. Along with that, we have to provide username and password. Okay. So using this username and password, we will check whether this user is authenticated or not. If the user is authenticated, then server will return an encoded token string. Now, how do we check a given username and password is valid or not? That we have already done inside this class here, application auth provider function grant resource owner credentials. So with the second option provider, we have given how do we want to validate a user with given username and password. And here we have the access token expired time span. That means, so whenever we make a token request with correct username and password, then server will return an encoded string. This string will have a lifespan or expired time. For now, I have given the time span as 1 minute. If you want to extend this time, you can modify here. Here we have given 60 minutes, that means 1 hour. And finally, we have this flag allow insecure HTTP to specify whether we allow insecure request or not. Now with these options, we have configured token based authentication inside this application. Now we need to tell the application we need to use these options. For that, we need to add these two lines here. Here we have provided the options and here we have specified bearer authentication. We will discuss what we meant by bearer later in this tutorial. Now let's check how this token creation works. For that, we need a username and password of registered user. In previous tutorial, we have registered few users, but I forgot their password. So let me add one more user. We have both Web API and Angular 5 application running on our development server. So here is the Angular 5 interface. I'm going to add a new user here. Username will be Ashton, then password will be 123, then first name will be Ashton, then last name will be Cox, Ashton Cox. Click on submit. So here we have registered a new user for Ashton Cox. Now we can test token creation inside this Web API project using Ashton Cox record. For that, we need to use one of the testing tool, Web API testing tool like Fiddler or Postman. In this system, I have installed Postman extension with Google Chrome. So here it is. Here I'm going to make a new request in order to get a token for Ashton Cox user. For that, we have to make a post request into this web API project here. Here, this web API project is running inside this base URL. So let me copy its URL from here and pasting here. And in order to get a token for a valid user, we have to use this token path. So here it is, /token. Then we have to post some data into this request. For that, you can go to body tab here. And first of all, we have to set the form type. I will set it as xwww form URL encoded. Here we have username is equal to Ashton, and we have password is 123. Finally, we have to set grant type as password. Grant underscore type is equal to password. Now click on send. So here we have a small problem related to JSON package newtonsoft.json. For that, we have to update web config file inside this solution here. In order to fix this problem, you can add this dependent assembly attribute for newtonsoft.json. I have given this dependent assembly attribute in video description. You can copy paste from there. Let me save this file, then build the solution. Now we need to make the request again. For that, you can click on this send button here. So that's it. Here we have an encrypted token from web API project, and it's of the type bearer, and it is going to expire within this much seconds. That means 60 minutes or 1 hour. So in order to get this token, we have made a post request into this URL. So this is what we are going to do inside our Angular 5 login form submit event. Okay, from now onwards, we have to use or append this access token in order to consume web API method which require authentication. Now let's look in action. Inside this web API project, from our previous tutorial, we have added a register web API method to register a new user. This register method do not need authentication. So I'm going to add a new web API method. In order to consume that web API method, user must be authenticated. So here it is. Here we have a web API method get user claims. It's of the type HTTP get. First of all, let me fix this namespace issues here. With this web API method, we are trying to return claims of current user. We have saved values for these claims during authentication process inside this auth provider function grant resource owner credentials here. So here we are trying to return username, email, first name and last name. Along with these data, I want to return logged on time. For that, we need to add one more property inside this account model class, which we have created in previous tutorial. It's of the type string, then property name will be logged on. Let me save this, then back to the web API method here, get user claims. In order to return logged on time, we can do this. Logged on is equal to, let me copy this and pasting here. Instead of last name, we need logged on key. So this web API method need authentication. For that, we need to add this authorization attribute here. Authorized attribute should be added here. Or you can apply this authorized filter throughout this application. For that, open web API config.cs file. Here we just need to add this line config filters dot add authorized filter. So this will apply authorized attribute throughout our web API methods. So we can remove this from here, and whenever we have a web API method which does not need authorization, in that case we can add this filter or attribute allow anonymous. Now let me save this and build this solution again. For that, you can use the shortcut Ctrl+Shift+B, or you can go here, build, then build solution. Now I'm going to consume this web API method get user claims which need authorization. So here is the base URL of the project. So let me copy that and pasting inside Postman. Along with this, we have to append this API get user claims. Let me copy this and pasting here. This web API method is of the type HTTP get. Okay, so we can keep this get as it is. Now let me try to make this request. Click on send. So here we have get this message, authorization has been denied for this request, and here we have the status code for node 1 unauthorized. So this is what we were talking when we created this token. Okay, in order to access a web API method which need authorization, we have to append this token along with that request. So let me copy this token from here, and then we can add that token inside headers here. We just need to pass it as authorization. Then first of all, you have to use this prefix bearer, then a space, then paste your token here. Now click on send. So here we have the response from our web API method. So this is how we can consume web API method which need authentication. If I pass a wrong key here, you will get the same for node 1 error. Authorization has been denied for this request for node 1 unauthorized status code. So this is how token based authentication works. Now we have to implement these steps in our Angular 5 application. So let's look how we can implement login and logout inside this Angular 5 app with existing web API project. So far we have created a login form here. Inside this form submit event, we will make a token request into this web API project with username and password. If the user is authenticated, then web API project will return an access token. So that is what we are going to do inside this form submit event. For that, let me wire up a form submit event here inside sign-in component HTML. ng submit is equal to, we will call a function on submit. Into that function, we will pass username and password from these text boxes. For that, I will use the local reference. Username dot value will give the text inside that text box. Same for password also. Password dot value. Now we have to create on submit function inside the component TypeScript file here. On submit, for this function we have two parameters, username and password. Inside the function, we have to make a token request to the web API project. For that, I'm going to add a new function inside this service class, user service class here. Function name will be user authentication. For this function, we have two parameters, username and password. Inside this function, we will make a token request to the web API project as we have done inside this postman here. So here we have made a post request with this token URL. Along with that, we have passed three datas here. So first of all, I'm going to declare a data variable here var data is equal to, first of all, we have username is equal to, I will append this username value to this data here. Username, then we have password, and password is equal to, we can append this here, password. After that, we have grant type as password. So here it is, and grant type is equal to password. After that, we have to set request header content type as form URL encoded. For that, let me declare one more variable here, var request header is equal to new HTTP headers. For that, we have to import this class here. Inside that, we will pass a JSON object like this. Content type, content hyphen type is equal to application forward slash x www URL encoded. Now we can make the token request using injected HTTP client object. So here it is, return this dot http dot post. First parameter will be the URL. So here is the base URL for that web API project. So we can do this dot root URL. Along with that, we have to append this forward slash token. After that, we have to pass the data. Then we have to pass the header. Headers is equal to request header. So here we have a function to make a token request to the web API project. Now back to the component TypeScript file here. We can call this user service function. For that, first of all, we have to inject user service inside this component TypeScript file. In order to inject user service class here, we can do this private user service. It's of the type user service class. And here inside this function, we can do this dot user service dot user authentication. Into that function, we have to pass this username and password. Username and password. This user authentication function will return an observable. So we can subscribe to that observable here. Subscribe. Inside that, we will define an arrow function with parameter data. It's of the type any. If this token request is successful, then it will call this arrow function. If this ends with an error response, we have to add one more arrow function to handle that error. For that, we have another arrow function with a single parameter. It's of the type HTTP error response. If this token request is successful, means user authentication is successful for given username and password. In that case, it will return a JSON object like this with these properties: access token, token type, express in. So inside this success arrow function, I'm going to store the access token in client web browser here. For that, we can do this local storage dot set item. First parameter will be the storage key, so it will be user token. Then we have to pass the value here, data dot access underscore token. Most often after a successful authentication, we will take that user to home page or dashboard. So here I'm going to navigate the user to the home component. For that, first of all, we have to inject router inside this component. Private router, it's of the type router class. Now we can do this dot router dot navigate. Inside the function, we will pass an array with home component path forward slash home. That's it. Now we have to handle this error response because of wrong username or password. For that, I'm going to add a boolean property here, is login error. It's of the type boolean. First of all, I will initialize with false. Now if there is an error with user authentication, I will set this boolean property here. This dot is login error is equal to true. Now based on this property value, I am going to show an error message inside this component HTML here. First of all, we need a div with classes red text, then we need sender class, then we need error hyphen message class. In order to show and hide this div based on that property, we have to add this directive ng if is equal to is login error property. So let me copy this and pasting here. Inside this div, we want to show the error message. For that, first of all, I will add an icon from material icons. For that, we can do this I tag with class material hyphen icons, then error. After that, we have the error message incorrect username or password. Sorry, here we have an error with header import inside user service class. So let me fix that first. So this is the import statement that caused this error. So let me copy this HTTP headers from here. Now we have to import that HTTP headers from Angular common HTTP. Let me remove this line from here. Now let me save this. We have few more errors with import statement inside signin component.ts file. Here we have to import HTTP error response from Angular common HTTP. Then we have to import router from Angular router. Let me save this and back to the application here. Now let me try to log in with Ashton record. Username will be Ashton, then password will be 123. Click on login. So here we have successfully logged in inside this application. And now we are inside the home component with default text. Now inside this home component, I want to add a navbar with sign out button. For that, let me go to the materialized CSS documentation. You can search for navbar here. So I want to add a navbar with few modifications from this example. So back to the component HTML here. I want to replace this default paragraph with modified navbar from materialized CSS. So here it is. Let me save this and back to the application here. So here we have a navbar. Along with that, we have a logout button. Now I'm going to wire up a click event for this logout button. So back to the component HTML here. So here we need a click event. We will call another function logout. Now we have to define this logout function inside the component TypeScript file here. Logout function, we don't have any parameter for this function. Now in order to log out a user, we can do the opposite that we have done during user authentication inside sign-in component TypeScript file here. Here we have stored access token inside web browser local storage as user token. Now using this user token, we will implement user authentication and authorization inside this Angular 5 application in a bit. Before that, let me show you how to log out a user. For that, you can remove the user token from web browser local storage. For that, we can do this local storage dot remove item. Inside this function, we just need to pass this key of local storage user token. Let me copy this and pasting inside this function here. So it will remove the user token from our web browser local storage. After logout operation, we need to show login form. That means we have to navigate sign-in component here. For that, first of all, we need to inject router here. Private router, it's of the type router. Now let's add import statement for this router class. For that, you can use the shortcut, hold Control, then press period and click on this import statement. So here we added router import statement. Now we can use this object router, this dot router dot navigate. Inside that, we will pass an array /login. Let me save all of these modifications and back to the application here. So here we have already logged inside this application. In order to log out this application, you can click on this logout button here. So here we are successfully logged out from this application and we are again inside this login form. Since we just log out from this application should not allow me to access home component. But if I directly enter home component URL here I can see the home component here. Now in order to handle these unauthorized requests inside this Angular 5 application, we have to update our router with guards. So let's look how we can implement router guards inside this Angular 5 application. For that, first of all, I will add a new folder here. I will name this folder as auth. Inside the folder, I want to create a guard. For that, right click on it, then open in terminal. In order to create a guard, you can use this Angular CLI command ng g for generate, then g for guard. Then we want to name the guard. I want to create an auth guard, so I will just type auth here, then hit enter. So inside the folder, we have created an auth guard here, authguard.ts. So here we have the auth guard with default codes. Here we have the required import statement here. And here we have a class auth guard which implement from can activate from Angular library. And here we have the can activate function. Inside that, we will check whether this request is authorized or not. Here we have the two parameters for this function, and this function is allowed to return these types of data. For now, we are going to return a boolean here. So let me remove other return types. In order to check whether the current user is already authenticated or not, first of all, we will check the local storage with user token. If there is a value inside local storage with this user token, we can say that this user is authenticated. In that case, we will return true from this can activate function. Otherwise, we will redirect the user to login form. For that, first of all, we have to inject router inside this class. So here we have the constructor. Inside that, we have to inject router, private router. It's of the type router class. Now we have to add import statement for this whole control, then press period. Then click on this import statement here. If the user is not authenticated, we will redirect to login form here. For that, we can do this .router.navigate to the login path, which means sign in component. Finally, we have to return false here. So here we have created an auth guard. Now we need to tell the application where do we need to use this auth guard. For that, first of all, go to appmodule.ts file here, and we have to add auth guard inside providers array here, auth guard. And here we have added import statement for auth guard here. Now back to the router.ts file here. So here we have already configured router inside this application. So here we have only one route which need authorization. So this is the route home component. For that, we can do this. Can activate is equal to, then we will pass an array with auth guard. Auth guard. Click on this, it will automatically add import statement for auth guard. Now let me save all of these modifications and back to the application. Currently we are inside the login form. If I try to access home component, because we are not authorized to access that home component. Now let me try to log in again, action, then password will be 123, click on login. So here we are inside the home component. Now I want to show you one last thing. Here inside this Web API project, we have created a Web API method getUserClaims. In order to consume this Web API method, we need authorization. In order to access methods which need authorization, we have to pass access token like we have done inside this Postman. Here we have passed authorization with bearer token. Now let's look how we can make a request with access token in our Angular 5 application. So back to Visual Studio Code Editor. First of all, let me close all tabs here. Then inside home component TypeScript file, I'm going to show these user claims, username, email, first name, last name logged on inside this home component here using card component from Materialize CSS. For that, I will use ng-onIt lifecycle hook of home component. First of all, we have to create a function inside this user service class, get user claims. We don't have a parameter for this function. Inside the function, we will make an HTTP GET request like this. Okay, so let me copy this URL from here, then back to the IDE. In order to make a GET request, we can do this dot http dot get. First of all, we have to pass the URL. First parameter is the URL, so we have base URL inside this property root URL. Along with that, we have to append this API get user claims. If we make a request like this, it will return 401 unauthorized status code because we are not passing access token here. In order to pass an access token, we can do this headers is equal to new HTTP headers. Inside that, we will pass a JSON object with authorization. So let me copy this. Authorization is equal to bearer. Along with that, we have to pass access token that we can retrieve from local storage. Local storage dot get item. Inside that, we will pass the key user token. Finally, from this function, we will return the observable back to the caller. Now we can call this function inside home component TypeScript file. First of all, we have to inject user service class here. Private user service. It's of the type user service class. Inside ng on a lifecycle hook, we can do this dot user service dot get user claims. This function will return an observable, so we can subscribe to that observable here. Subscribe. Inside that, we will define an arrow function with a single parameter data. It's of the type any. In order to store user claims, I have created a user claims property here. Now we can do this dot user claims is equal to data. Now inside this user claims, we have details of user like username, email, first name, last name, and logged in. We want to show these user details inside home component using card component from Materialize CSS. For that, we can add this card component. Here we have a div. We will show this div only when this user claims details is retrieved from Web API project. Now let me save all of these modifications here and back to the application here. So here we have the user claims, username, email, full name, then time of login. So here we have shown how to consume Web API method by passing HTTP header authorization using access token. Finally, we need to make few more changes related to consuming Web API method like this. Here we have two problems. First problem, we have to append this bearer access token to every Web API method which need authorization. Second problem, when we pass access token like this, we will get 401 unauthorized response because the access token that is saved inside local storage will expire within 60 minutes or as per our configuration. After that, we will get 401 unauthorized status code. In those cases, we need to redirect the user to login component. So these two steps should be done with every Web API method which need authorization. So we have to find a place where we can handle these common tasks. For that, we have interceptors in Angular 5. Now let's look how we can use interceptors in Angular 5. For that, first of all, inside this auth folder, I will create a new file. I will name this file as auth.interceptor.ts file. First of all, I will add all required import statement here. After that, we have to create a class which is to be injected in another places. So I will add this decorator injectable here. So here we have created the class auth interceptor which is implemented from HTTP interceptor. Now we have to implement HTTP interceptor here. Inside this function, we will do the common task. Before this intercept function, I want to inject router inside this class. So here we have injected router here. Now back to the intercept function. Once we implement this HTTP interceptor inside this application, all HTTP requests will be passed through this function intercept. Inside this function, we will append bearer access token to every request, and we will handle for not one unauthorized status code. But there are some requests which does not need authorization token like login and user registration. In order to bypass those requests from this intercept function, we can do this. We will have an if clause here. Inside that, we will check whether the request header got a property no auth as true. Then we will bypass the request like this. After that, we will check this if local storage has a user token or not. If there is a user token, that means this user is authenticated. In that case, we will clone the current request. Inside the request header, we will add authorization with access token from local storage. And here we executed the clone request. If the request is successful, we won't do anything. Inside error, we will check if status code is for node 1 or not. That means whether access token is expired or not. In that case, we will redirect the user to login page. Finally, I want to add an else block for this if statement here. That means there is no token for current user in local storage. In that case also, we will redirect the user to login page. Now we have created an auth interceptor. Now we need to tell the application we have created an auth interceptor and we need to use them. For that, you can open app module.ts file. Inside the providers array, we have to add a JSON object like this. Okay, here we have provide, use class and multi. For these classes, we have to add import statement. Hold control, then press period. Click on this import statement. Same for auth interceptor also. Now back to the auth interceptor. Inside this intercept function, first of all, we made an assumption request which does not need access token will have header property no auth as true. So let's find those requests and add this property there. For that, open user service class. First of all, we have register user function. Inside that, we made a request to the user register web API method. Now we need to add no auth property to the header. For that, first of all, I will create a property request header like this. Now we can pass this header here. Headers is equal to request header property. Now we have to do the same for this token request also. So I will add this attribute no auth here. No auth is equal to true. Since we have added bearer access token inside this HTTP interceptor, we don't need to add this bearer token again inside this get user claims. We will add them from HTTP interceptor. So we can remove that from here. Now let me save all of these modifications here. And back to the application. Let me log out from this application. In order to test the complete working of this application, first of all, let me add a user here. Username will be Benjamin. Then password will be 123. Then we have email. I will type it as 123@gmail.com. Then we have first name. I will type it as Benjamin John. Click on submit. Now let me try to log in with this Benjamin record. Username will be Benjamin. Then password will be 123. Click on login. Now if you want to log out from this application, you can click on this logout button here. So in this tutorial, we have discussed how to implement login and logout in Angular 5 with Web API and token based authentication. If you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video. And for more awesome videos like this, please be subscribed to this channel .NET Mob. You can download this project source code from the link given below in video description. Please like and share this video with your friends and colleagues so that they can benefit from this. Have a nice day. Bye.